I think we are live.
There's people coming in, so I think it's
Yeah. Scoot is in the house.
Hey, Scoot. Liam.
Right. Now is when I try to figure out how I want to have this on my screen so that I can see both chat and my notes.
I never know how much to respond to chat in these things. It always confuses me because you don't want to ignore people, but then in the recording, because it
Right.
doesn't record the chat, it makes no sense afterwards. But
Yeah,
what
it's
can you do?
very different from like if you're really into streaming and use something like OBS. A lot of streamers, what they'll do is they give you the option to show the chat on your video,
Right.
so
Yeah.
that you can just freely talk to chat, because if someone watches it back, they can see the chat on the side of their window, and it works out just fine. Um, Hopefully at some
They're,
point, because they
they're probably working on it.
prioritize live, Substack will
Yeah.
prioritize some way of, like YouTube, where you can click to show the live chat if you're
Right.
watching a video after the fact, and it'll pop up the live chat on the side. So
Yeah. Otherwise, you're doing the thing where you like make an exaggerated motion, like you're reading the. I don't know if you do that, but I do that to make sure people know it's like I'm looking at the chat right now.
right, which is why I
Not
have
just
the chat
glancing.
open on my desktop, because I don't want to be that person who's like,
I was going to say, I do
so
that
I'm
just
like,
because my eyes are terrible.
Oh,
if
well,
I
there's that
have
too.
if I have it open on the side, it's like, okay, I can just kind of glance on to my right. Um, this is not alcohol; it's just a regular champagne cola.
That's
No,
okay.
I don't drink.
We could party. That's all right.
I just need
No judgment.
I just
No
needed a
judgment here.
flavored beverage because I only drink water all day. I needed something.
I mean, we're all at very different times of day right now too. So
That's true.
But we have managed to align at the same time, which,
Yeah, see,
takes some doing.
I have my solo cup of water and my flavored drink.
gotta have multiple beverages. That is important.
Okay.
Scoot doesn't believe you, Erica. Wants proof that it's non-alcoholic.
It's actually one of my favorite. It's
Ooh.
Goya champagne cola, okay? It's not
Oh, it's good.
alcoholic. It's very delicious. I buy it by the truckload. It's one of my childhood drinks. Okay. All right. We got people coming in. Welcome. Thank you. And apologies for moving the date and the time and all the things. And apologies to my guests for sticking with me as unfortunately, Wednesday morning last week, I was just taking an innocent step out of the bathroom, and my foot turned and I planted it really hard, and I heard the crunch, and I fell to the floor writhing in pain, and my wife came running and said, "Oh my God, what happened? What?"
Oh,
And it was a wrap after that. I barely made it to the bedroom, and then I was like, I'm done.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, a live stream on pain meds would have been really interesting, but probably not.
Right.
Probably a different tone.
Right.
Different kind of chat, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so as everyone knows, a few weeks ago, I don't even remember the exact date. I don't know why, honestly. I had these questions in my head about serialized fiction, and I thought, why don't I ask the people who write serialized fiction their answers to these questions? And me being me, I turned it into a Google form, which then turned into, all of these things. And then I was like, I need charts and graphs, and I need data points, and I need as many people to answer this as possible to have really good data to feed off of. And the community came through, and I got 70 people who quickly came on and answered. And rather than give you guys access to all of the information, I thought I would kind of try to condense it into a few major bullet points. And so I thought we would kind of take a look at the bullet points, and then we can get into. I kind of chopped it up into 5 main topics, and then the sixth is just to get questions if anyone has questions, which I will try to keep an eye on in the chat in case the questions come during our discussions. But first, in case anyone in the room doesn't know who we are, which would be surprising to me if you don't know who we are. I have to
How did you get
question.
here?
I have to question
Who are you?
what you're doing here because that just makes no sense. Um, but I am Erica Drayton. I run Top in Fiction, and excuse me, and then which is a Substack that is for fiction writers that kind of tries to share, uplift, and highlight and spotlight as many fiction writers in the Substack community as possible on a weekly, monthly, everyday basis. And then I also personally have my own Substack, which is called Ink After Dark. Um, and I wanted to kind of figure out how I'm constantly trying to figure out how best to utilize the tools of Substack and the tools that we have in our own toolbox personally to promote and highlight and bring back this resurgence of serialized fiction. And so that's why when I thought about all of this and I thought about the 5 questions and I thought about all these things, I said, who are the best people that I could reach out to who could kind of have this open discussion with me that the community would trust, that we could all put our heads together and kind of just have, a hashing out. And I said, I can think of no better people in
But they
my
weren't available.
universe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, right.
We're the second string.
So my top 5 choices, unfortunately, some of them ghosted me, some of them said, hell no. I ain't about that life. And then I appealed and begged Sally and Simon, and they said, fine, sure, if you insist, we'll do it. Took some arm twisting, but they came on. So if you guys can now introduce yourselves and your Substacks and your um, fiction stuff.
Okay. Shall I go next?
Go
am
ahead,
I in the middle?
Simon.
I'm in the middle for me. I don't know if I am for everyone else.
Sure. Go for it.
Yeah, I write a newsletter called Write More, which I've been doing for about 5 years now. I was publishing a serial weekly that wrapped up in January, so I'm sort of mid projects at the moment. But yeah, I do the newsletter for Fridays. It's the fiction, and then Mondays I send out a newsletter that's kind of about anything, but in some ways it tends to be about serialization or storytelling or using Substack or something like that.
And I'm SE Reed on Substack, or Sally. People will call me Sally, but I write under SE Reed, and I write a fiction Substack called Tailbones, where I post couple of monthly short stories and weekly serials a couple times a year, and just started putting my serials out into published form as well. So I just wrapped up my 9th serial on Substack. So yeah, and then I also write some nonfiction at my other newsletter, but Tailbones is my most active spot on Substack.
And Essie Reed also does Tailstack News. I'm not going to let you not mention that, where she also promotes in a big way everything and important news that's happening in the fiction community. And she's been doing that for quite some time. So I'll make sure we point that out.
That's true.
Okay, so let's talk serialized fiction because it seems to be the buzzword these days, at least if you're in the fiction community. I know we're very siloed, and so it might seem like this is what everyone's talking about. So depending on who you follow and how much you're on Substack Notes, then, serialized fiction is a big deal. People have a lot of opinions about it, a lot of thoughts about it, a lot of pros and cons about how Substack treats those of us who write serialized fiction. And so I just wanted to kind of get a bare bones idea about it. And one of the, just a high level before we even get to the part where we're on Substack and we're sharing our serialized fiction is the tools that we use, because I know that that's one of those things where a lot of people, we feel very, again, we're siloed in the community, but then we're also siloed at our own desk, at our own laptops, in our own software programs, and we think it's just a one-person deal. But at the end of the day, we all like to share and know what everyone else is working on. So one of the questions I asked that I wanted to know is what tools are you using? And the most common, which I thought was odd, And this is coming from a person who actually personally hates using Scrivener, but I live and die by Scrivener. I found it odd that the top two, number one was Google Docs and number two was Microsoft Word. And again, that's coming from someone who absolutely hates using Scrivener, but that is absolutely the only program that I use to write. But I hate it with a passion. Like, I would be the first person to be like, use Scrivener, but grit your teeth while you're doing it.
You're not getting that literature and latte sponsorship anytime soon, Erica.
No, I'm not. Until they do something about their compile feature, I don't know what to tell you. But in any event, like, I'm assuming we're all Scrivener users here, or do you actually know? Look, the head
No.
shake. If you say you use Microsoft Word, I'm gonna have to hang up on you.
I use Google Docs, actually.
Okay. I will accept Google Docs if only because I understand the need for it to be cloud-based, and you can literally open any of your devices, any of your smart devices, and have easy, emphasis on easy access to your work. And I say that because, again, let's come back to Scrivener and how much I hate it so much. How easy it is to access your Scrivener files on other devices. Oh, it's so easy. I wish this was liquor I was drinking, because it really isn't. It's just the worst. The worst. We're not here to talk about Scrivener and how good or bad it is. I know, Simon, you use Scrivener. And
I do, yeah.
Without, like, how well, and I guess Sally, I want you to answer first because you use Google Docs. So this I have to hear. How well do you find it to help you as you're doing your serialized fiction? Is it because you prefer Google Docs because of the ability to access it everywhere? Have you tried Scrivener and you're like, that's not for me? Like, why won't you use Scrivener? What's wrong with you?
So it's funny. It's a holdover from I used to have only a Chromebook. And so I couldn't use Scrivener. Yeah.
Right.
And so I now that I have a Microsoft machine, I technically could use Scrivener, but I'm a person of habit, and I'm just so deeply set in it. And you know what I think it is too, is I find that, I have used Scrivener. It was a long time ago, back in my NaNoWriMo days when Scrivener was all the rage, and you could do do a free trial back in those days.
And you could get, that's how I got my copy, because I completed Scrivener and got it for 50% off. So I paid like, $20 for it. And that's why I just happen to still have it to this day. But yeah.
Yeah. And I find it, for my uses, I find it too fussy. There's too many options. All I need is something to write the thing down, and then I can copy and paste it into Substack and do all the little twiddly bits that I like to do once I'm editing. But I like Google Docs because it is simple, it's streamlined, it's straightforward, and like you said, I love being able to access it anywhere. No matter if I'm on my phone, if I'm on my computer, wherever I happen to be, I can just open it up and I can find the file. So yeah, Google Docs is just, I like simple, and it's simple. So yeah.
Yeah, I think
Simon,
Google did a good job of just...
Do you use something else other than, do you use Scrivener or do you just use Scrivener?
I mostly just use Scrivener. I think Google Docs is really good because what they did well there was figure out what people actually use and putting those features in, and then they kind of forgot about everything else, which is actually fine 80% of the time. Using Word, I think, is inviting chaos and despair, because whenever I've used it, it always breaks my files in some way. Like if it's too long a project, it just falls over and can't even open the thing. All the formatting goes utterly mad. So that was kind of the main reason I moved away from it, 20 years ago or something. But yeah, Scrivener, I think I'm the sort of person who likes tinkering with tech and fiddling around with software, so it kind of suits my personality in that way. But what I found as I've got more and more into serials is that I need its level of fussiness and sort of organizational bits and bobs to keep me on track. I think I would be a much more stressed writer if I wasn't using Scrivener or something like Scrivener. It's the thing that lets me like put out a new chapter every week for 4.5 years without having a nervous breakdown kind of thing.
Right. It's one of those things where once you start using it and you get to know it, like I know Scrivener, so I hate it, but I know it, and I know how to use it. I know how to navigate it. So I grit my teeth and bear it, and I use it. And I don't think like I'm trying to use Google Docs now just for a backup because my worry and my issue with Scrivener is it's a .scriv file. And what am I going to do with that? If something crashes, if I lose it, if I can't open it, nothing else is going to open a .scriv file. So for that reason alone, I started like, especially my 100 word stories, they currently live on Scrivener. If that thing decides to no longer work, I have 1,100 word stories that are gone. Well, they're
You
not
can
because I have them on
the
Substack, and I
a
could
Scrivener
easily
project
probably.
file. A Scrivener project file consists of individual RTF text files, so you can retrieve it even if it goes completely upside
Right,
down.
right. There's a weird way to do it. But yeah, so okay, so that's the broader thing. We're all writing on these writing tools. Some of us I've heard have even written directly in Substack. I don't understand who would do that. We're
Brave
crazy
souls.
bad people.
Brave souls.
Because I've had just my weekly update, my monthly update. I'm writing directly in Substack, and it's kaputs and it's gone, and I just wrote like the most brilliant pieces and it's gone. So I could never do that. But so brave souls. But Google Docs, you've got Scrivener, and then if you really are so desperate, you have Word. But that's really for desperate times. I feel
I'm
like
sure there's
all.
some Notes app people out there too that they're their native
I
Notes app on
tried.
their phone. I'm sure there's
I
a few
I
people who
actually
do that too.
tried Microsoft Notes for a hot minute because I've seen some people use that, and those are like masochists. But anyway, so one of the things that came up is now if you're serializing on Substack specifically, there are things that Substack gives you that you don't get really from a blog, you don't really get from a newsletter, and those are things like interaction. Interaction is the big thing. So are people serializing for the interaction, or are they serializing for the idea to monetize the thing later? So, and by monetization, it could be turning on the paywall, but it could also be gathering it together, putting it in a book form, and then selling it as an ebook, print book, what have you. There's different ways to monetize what one, is putting out. But it seemed like the majority of this, at least the 70 who answered the questions, it was less about monetizing and more about the interaction and getting that sort of communication, whether it was through comments, reactions, chatting directly on Substack notes. Is that something that you feel you appreciate or you like having for your serialized fiction? Because it's hard to get that from a blog unless people already know your blog and can go to it and can do that kind of interacting. So you're less likely to get someone to go to your WordPress, but with Substack, it's really easy to get people to go to your Substack just because of the nature of the way that they have set things up to be found. So you have an extra layer of interaction that you can't get from a Patreon or from a MailChimp.
Well, and I'm
Yeah, I
curious
mean, the thing
for
is, I think
Simon's. I
Mailchimp.
was curious to hear about Simon's take on this because you were on Wattpad, weren't
Okay,
you?
yeah, I was on Wattpad and I had a WordPress blog as well back in the
Mm,
day. But like on the one hand, if you've got something like Mailchimp, it's really designed for corporate marketing. It
right.
doesn't let you build anything other than sell stuff if you have a product in that way, I
Mm,
suppose. Um, and if you've got a blog, like nobody goes to blogs.
nobody.
Like even 10 years ago,
Unless,
it was tough.
right, unless you're a big name person who already
Yeah.
has a following of people who love the work you've already put out, so they're going to look for your blog. No one's going to your blog.
No, exactly. And I mean, and even then, like it's increasingly difficult to get that kind of traction. Like although you can have a kind of newsletter set up for a blog, it doesn't work quite as well. I think the thing that Substack did is kind of merge the two things together so that you have an attractive blog-like thing that people can just go and check out, but then you're also cumulatively building this newsletter in the background so that every time you post a new blog post, essentially it goes out to your list. And it doesn't sound particularly special. Like that feels like something that should have been happening for like 30 years. And it sort of was, but in pieces and like in different ways. And like my website blog thing never quite made sense because no one looked at it, and I couldn't really build a newsletter using the traditional newsletter tools because that just didn't seem to work either. And then when Substack stuck it together, it kind of suddenly made sense in that way. But yeah, I mean, coming back to the kind of main thing, like, are we in it for community first or monetization first? I think if you're writing fiction and you're in it primarily for monetization, like regardless of how you're publishing your stuff, then you're probably doing the wrong thing. Like, you don't write fiction to make money. Like, you can maybe do it, but I feel like if that's your main goal, there's a lot easier ways to go and make some money, probably.
Yeah, I think, I think it can happen, but I think that it's an exercise in frustration. I think it's serialization in particular is an exercise in frustration if the goal is stats and if the goal is money. But not to say it can't happen and not to say you can't grow a following. I think, yeah, the idea of why we do it. Personally, I had never finished anything when I started on Substack. I had started so many things and I was all, for myself. Like the one time I'd ever finished anything successfully was way back in high school. My friends and I had this like private forum where we just posted fun things to each other. And that was the only time I'd ever finished a story, was when I serialized it in chunks to my friends. And so being here and starting to think about, well, maybe that is the only way I'm going to be able to finish something, is if I break it into chunks and I have people who hopefully want to read it. And so to that extent, I would say I love comments and I love engagement. Serials can be a little tricky for engagement. You'll find that you'll have like a handful of people who are really passionate about the story and they're following it every week and they want to say something every time. But a lot of them are going to be lurkers who are just reading along and they're enjoying it. They're not going to say anything. They might not even click the like button. So yes, I think that the community aspect is a huge part of it. For me, it was accountability, where knowing people were reading was what kept me posting. Whether or not I got engagement was kind of by the wayside. But yeah, the accountability piece is a big part for me.
And one of the things that I think a lot of people forget, again, I think it's because we are very siloed, is we think that because Sally knows that there's a Substack Notes and Simon knows that there's a Substack Notes and Erica knows that there's a Substack Notes, we assume that the 2,000 plus subscribers we have also know about this fantasy island, this gardened wall where you can enter in and feel safe and comfy and cozy and have all these conversations and interactions. When in reality, I would think less than like half of my subscribers are aware of any of that, are aware of Substack, are aware of Substack Notes, are aware that they can actually click comments and leave a comment and that there's a place for that. Because back in the day before Substack allowed us to do this crazy thing, if you got an email newsletter, it was not a WordPress blog. Like they were very two different things. So if you went to a WordPress blog, you knew you went to LiveJournal or you went to Blogger and you were leaving a comment there. But if you got an email at gmail.com from, Stephen King or whoever happens to be sending you an email about their latest book coming out, the idea wasn't for you to then click a button that says leave a comment and then go to so it similar to in this Substack Live situation where it's weird about people leaving comments in the chat and should we be responding to those? Like, this is a whole new world that Substack opened in a very good way, I think, because I know when I came to Substack, I had a MailChimp, a Patreon, a WordPress, and, X. And I had literally X, like Twitter, and I found myself in a place of like distress and despair, and I hated it. And then Substack came, and I was like, I don't need MailChimp anymore. Buy MailChimp. I don't need Patreon anymore. Buy Patreon. I don't need my WordPress blog. Buy. Oh my God, they gave me Substack notes. I don't need Twitter. Oh, see ya. And I went from all of these different houses that I had to keep coming to this house and replenishing, going to that house and replenishing. So now I don't need any of the houses. And now I'm just replenishing the one house and dealing with the one thing and just having the one place that I'm doing all of my work. And if you want to find me, this is where you go. So on the one hand, Substack is a great place, but this kind of segues into what I'm calling the wish list. We all have a wish list. And for many of us, the wish list looks like complaining. So we all have complaints. Why doesn't Substack do this so that my serial can achieve X? And to that, I say there's very little that you can control. And so it's hard to control a wish list. You can have a wish list, but that doesn't mean that your wishes will come true. But I do want to go over what the wish list is, because there is a wish list. You and I know Substack may or may not watch this. They may or may not read the comments here, because they do know who we are. I'm not going to be ignorant of that the powers that be are aware of who we are in the fiction community. We are those people. So,
well, the thing I always look out for, right, is if I make a suggestion in notes about some feature I'd like to see, I then always look out for the Mills Baker like.
correct.
Yeah.
When
Correct.
Mills Baker likes
And
it, I'm like, aha.
And I've received a few of those recently, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
well then, now is the
Yeah.
time to start really talking here.
Yeah.
This is where we really start spreading the word.
It's on a tiny post-it note somewhere in an office, like in the corner.
Yeah, on a wall. There's like a huge wall of the post-it notes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, thinking on serialized fiction and realizing that, Substack doesn't cater to just serialized fiction writers, right? Substack, as a company that makes money, has to worry about the whole and not the little piece of the pie that we make up. But let's just pretend like they do. What is some of the wish list things? And there was some that stuck out from the 70 responses. But before I even look at those, I want to hear from you guys. Like if you could pick one or two wish list things that Substack could do to just make your life a little bit easier writing your serialized fiction and sharing it out into the world. I feel like there's at least 3 that everyone wants. that everyone wants, whether you write one now, have written one in the past, or want to write one but you're not because you don't have these features. What would they be?
Well, I think so. I do try to think cross genre, not just fiction, but also nonfiction. Because I do think that is the best sales tactic for the Substack team, is that like, what are some things that are versatile, right?
That wouldn't just help us, but it would help the whole. Right.
Yeah. And I think one of the big ones is just better navigational buttons. And the reason why I think that could be more versatile is because you do get nonfiction posts that are a series within somebody wants to go off on a certain topic, but they want to make a series out of it. That could absolutely work. Like it could work to have much clearer, because they do have previous and next buttons. There are ways to make that happen. Obviously, a lot of us do kind of an ad hoc thing. We're just going to make it up. But I think that there is an argument to be made for having, a centralized button you can press to take you back to some kind of table of contents page for a series of posts, and previous and next buttons to make it easier to skip back and forth. I think
what
of all of them, that's the most convenient.
Right. And when I think about navigation, I think about something even more simpler than that because I still have a website, right? And my website is run by WordPress.org. And so I am there tinkering every so often, even though I know nobody ever goes to that webpage ever. One of the things that I wish Substack would do, which I think would just help everyone, and I feel like it's a switch they could easily flip, is let me see the menu outside of the homepage. Like if I click on a post, let me see my top bar that lets me go to a different section or something.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like,
I got
why
you.
do I have to go home so that I can then see, so I could go to a different section or to a different area? It annoys the heck out of me
Yeah, having the
that
nav bar be
that even
visible
if I
from
go to
anywhere.
a section, like when you go to a section, it doesn't give you the home row.
Yeah.
It's like, give me the home row. Like, come on.
It's
Like,
home for a reason.
right, because to me, and then if you did that and you let me nest so that it has a drop-down menu like a WordPress menu where you could have a section or a header and then it drops down to show all of your serials so you could click on it and it's a drop down of all your serials and they could easily click on it and go to that section that has all of the chapters. I feel like the menu bar is the simplest thing where if you just let us have it everywhere and let us nest and do sub menus, it would solve a lot of the navigational issues because you're constantly having to go home to go forward and go back to go forward.
Yeah, and in terms of that consistency as well, like it's been mentioned in the chat a couple of times, that the mobile app is also wildly inconsistent with the desktop. So you can set up all this amazing navigational assists on desktop. So if someone's in a browser, they get that and they get sections and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
The app just strips it all out. I'm pretty sure, I don't think I'm inventing this. I'm pretty sure Mills did say that is something they're aware of and that they want to fix. So I think that is on the radar. Because if you have a section for a serial, like it's just invisible on the web app, which on the mobile app, which is really annoying. I think in terms of other stuff, like what you were saying, like taking the kind of the concept of books to the next level, like as well as on our own publications, being able to sort of list our books, which is useful for people who are browsing our work. What would be more useful, I think, to readers is just to have their own sort of bookshelf library type thing. Because at the moment, the way the app or the desktop app is designed, you can save individual posts, but that's no good if you're reading a serial because you just want to have the serial as a book that you then click to and you're back on whatever chapter you got to. Like
an
with
ebook.
reading an ebook. Yeah.
Right.
And that would help with nonfiction serials. It would help with podcasts. It would help with all that kind of stuff. But at the moment, you always have to try and navigate your way around to find your way back to whatever it is you're reading. And having, your list, your feed of posts of just everyday newsletters over here, but then sort of books over on the other side, that would be incredibly helpful for readers, I think.
Yeah, and it would help us from not having to remember to put like, oh, did I put the next chapter and previous chapter link at the top and bottom of the thing
I forgot to do that for 4.5 years. I had to go back like 2 weeks later on every chapter. I'd be like, I didn't do it.
That happened to me actually with the SEO. I wanted there to be a proper SEO for the link. And so like by number 500, I wanted everyone to be numbered properly. And so I had to go all the way back to 1 and do WS-001, WS-002, and I did it all the way.
So that brings me to my other request, which is the ability to batch process like minor changes to stuff. So you can add tags or move stuff into different
Being able
sections.
to batch tags would be so nice.
And one of the things I would love is being able to batch paywalls. Like, can I just paywall a section? Can I say that this section, which I usually put my serials under a section, which is ideal because you click the section and you've got all the chapters. Can I just like check a box that says everything that has this section is going to be paywalled after 2 months? Why is the only option paywall everything or paywall nothing? like that's the only, it's like you paywall all of it or you do it piecemeal. It's like, no, I want to be able to decisively say this section. And now one of the things that I decided to do is I'm essentially paywalling everything, but I have a free to read tag. So I go into the few things that I know I want to be free to read, and I'll go into those. I'll take the paywall off and I'll add the tag, and now I have I put it up on my menu so you could click free to read, and that's everything there is essentially not paywalled. And that was my little workaround, was like with using tags. I'm like, okay, how can I make it so that people know what they can read for free and not be hit with a paywall that I have to constantly put up for everything? But
Yeah, and I think that what you're talking about also speaks to, not to get off topic here, but I think it's in the same vein, is that there is a very distinct demarcation between the like pre-notes era and post-notes era of knowledge of how powerful the Substack post, like the actual like engine of the post thing is. And sometimes I wonder, like, how are people who are joining post notes learning about some of these features? Like tags seem like tags, people think tags are searchable. It's like,
Right.
no, but they are useful. They're just
They are
not
useful.
useful the way you think they're useful, or like sections. Like some
Right.
of those things are really powerful.
Yeah, and a
And I
lot of
don't
people
know.
don't understand, like me as someone who's trying to highlight serials, and I have the wall of serials on Top in Fiction. One of the number one question I get is what in the hell I'm talking about when I say that you can't be on the wall unless your serial is in a section
Mhm.
or has a page that's listing all the chapters. Like it doesn't compute, and I don't blame them. It's because, unless you're looking for the how-to that Simon has out there for you on how to use sections,
That's a good
like
plug. It's a
if you're
really good section, the
if you're
how-to
if
thing.
you're coming into Substack, you're coming as someone who's either used a Mailchimp type thing before, so you're looking for Mailchimp type tools, or you've used WordPress blogs and you're looking for WordPress blog type tools. So you're not really, and you're expecting the key terms like tags to
Mhm.
work the way they work in other places that use hashtags or use tags, and you're expecting it to work the same, and you're thinking, oh, this is what I'm going to do. And it's just the SEO or whatever, the magic is just going to happen. And it's like, no, it's actually very different. And, it's almost good that we got here as early as we did to Substack, because we were here pre-notes. So we're well aware of all of the features that we had to learn before notes came about, and we could talk to each other about it freely and openly and live and have those discussions about every time Substack added a new feature. Like
Yeah.
the
Well,
other
we got to
day I
see those
was
features come in one by one as well, rather
I mean,
than
because
new
Yeah.
arrivals who just have everything.
we spent
Yeah.
so much. I mean, I spent so much time on Substack. When I saw that I just posted the image I took, I was literally in the middle of writing something, and I turned to my wife and I was like, they wrote the word template in between this word, and it wasn't there a second ago, I swear. And I took a screenshot real quick. I was like, I don't know what this does because I'm in the middle of writing something, but I'll get back to that. Like, it literally, it, like, popped up, like, boop, like a star just popped up on
In
my
real
screen
time.
in real time. I still haven't looked at it. Simon, have you created a template yet? I haven't. I'm terrified. I don't know
It's
what it
quite
is.
interesting.
I don't know why you have to be in a draft to do it. I'm like, why can't I
So,
start a template from the settings? Like, I'm very confused from the dashboard. I'm terrified. I don't know what to do about it, but it's there.
so the thing that's really interesting is I assumed it was going to be a template for an entire post,
That's what I thought.
because
It's not that. Don't disappoint
it's
me.
no, it's not that.
Oh, no.
But you can kind of do that manually by having like a templated post that you duplicate.
I mean, that's what I do
In
basically
drafts.
for like
Yeah.
Top in Fiction, my weekly post. I literally go back to last week, duplicate it, change
Yeah.
the info.
No, the new template thing is you can create like a chunk of text in a post and then create that as a templated piece. So if you have like a header type thing that you stick into all your posts, or if you have a particular, I don't know, subscribe call to action where you've customized the text and done
Okay,
some
yeah.
little graphic or something, you can save that as a templated piece. And then you get like a little list of all those bits and
Of all
bobs.
the templates, and then you just click on it and it drops it into the thing. Okay. And that makes sense, because one of the things that I hate is if you have a lot of people who are using the app to read your work, but you have important information in your header and your footer of your email, they're not going to see it in the app. So a lot of times I'll put, my call to action in the header and footer, not realizing that the reason why they don't get any clicks is because Substack people are using the Substack app to read my email, and so they're not seeing my header and footer information. So that's something to keep in mind. Like if you think, oh, I'll put the previous and next chapter stuff or whatever what have you in the header and footer, it, it's best to put it nested in the email itself, so that way you make sure that everyone, whether they get the email or they open it in the app, sees it. Because a lot of times the things you put in your header and footer, I mean, unless someone scrolls all the way down to the footer anyway, it's lost. It's lost in oblivion. No one goes down there, right? Um, okay. So we talked about community. We talked about the frustration of navigations. Working my way through the topics here. Um, so let's talk about specifically the serial. So what do you feel like you're getting from the community and from Substack that fuels you to keep writing serials, that if you didn't have it from Substack or from the community, you probably wouldn't even have spent 4.5 years writing a serial, or you wouldn't have written, a dozen serials and will be writing another dozen, Sally? Do you feel that the reason why you guys are producing the amount that you're producing is because of the tools of Substack and the community that Substack happens to have readily and easily available to you in all of these different facets? Or would you just be siloed and not even talking to me, wouldn't even know who I am? None of us would know who each other are. You would still have um, your serials out there in some other way.
Yeah, I mean, I was writing for, I don't know, 6 years or something before I moved to
Right.
Substack.
Yeah,
So
would you
I'd done
still be on Wattpad if you didn't find Substack? Or would you have found another medium?
I think I'd have left I'd have left Wattpad regardless, because it's just a sort of weirdly ancient platform, and they weren't developing it, and it's so incredibly obtuse in terms of who's reading and who isn't reading, and whether nobody reads or like 200,000 people read. You have no idea why or what's going on, and it's all meaningless. But you get some nice comments over there, like people that are there to read fiction, in one way or the other. But no, I mean, a bit like Sally was saying, I started writing serial fiction slightly by accident, in that the first one I did was an experiment, just because I thought, oh, this might be fun, because I've not written anything in this form before. Let's see what happens there. And then it turned out that it was a really useful sort of productivity aid, like you were saying, Sally. Like it just helps me come back frequently and in a regular capacity, so that I keep writing until a project is completed, rather than being distracted by something shiny and new. And that's kind of why I stuck with it, because if I don't write and publish and sort of interact with people in that way, my brain goes drifting off somewhere else, and I'm kind of always tinkering with stuff. But doing a serial makes me actually keep going and finish something. So it's kind of essential for that. Moving over to Substack, it was always going to be harder to find an audience, and but I think my hope was that the people that I did find would be more engaged and more interesting, and that's turned out to be the case. So yeah, it's been satisfying.
Yeah, and I think for me, a lot of it has been down to experimentation, having some of these ideas in my head and knowing that I have an audience who are just a game to hear whatever I have to say, which is really that's a huge deal for me. That it just knowing that not every serial is going to strike every person, but it'll find its people among the people who read my work. And yeah, that sense of experimentation, and also just process finding. I just didn't know what my writing process even was before Substack, because I said, I hadn't finished anything. So I had ideas of what I thought my writing process probably was. But it's not until you're actually in it and you're able to try, because for me, it's that free fall feeling of weekly publishing. It, for some reason, it works for me. It's terrifying, but it works for me. And it's I've kind of found a rhythm that works for me now after 9 serials of like, and Smoke Mouth, my most recent one, was a kind of a difficult example because it started in a weird timing. And so it was longer than I meant for it to be. But at the same time, still being able to trust myself and trust the process that I built and come back
and
to
trust
it.
your community that they would be okay that you would
Yes.
step away and come back and you would finish it eventually.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Because there's something scary about a dead serial, right? It's like, you don't want to leave something.
So
undone.
I want to try to do a bit of it, talking about experimentation. Let's do an experiment right now, because there are a lot of people who just started, who are thinking about starting. So I thought, what if we had a serial right now called Project X? Okay, and you've got this serial idea. Each of you, what would your process be to bring your serial idea, Project X, to the platform of Substack? Where today do you start, knowing all that you know, knowing the tools that Substack has? How do you start? And if you want, you can skip past the using Scrivener and Google Docs to kind of write it. But just let's get to the nitty gritty, because I know a lot of people want to know, like, what exactly am I doing? Like, how do I begin? What's the first thing that I do? I'm sure everyone has a different starting off point. So what is your starting off point when you bring it to Scrivener? Oh God, when you bring it to Substack.
What do you think, Sam?
Well, I mean,
yeah. What's your
I've
next
only done
4.5?
it once.
This is a 4.5-year project now. This is your next one,
Yeah.
Project X.
Yeah.
You would you start it the same way you started the last one, or knowing all the tools that have changed over time? Would you?
No, I
start
got
it
everything
and do
completely
something
wrong.
different?
I got everything wrong with Triverse for about a year. In that I had no idea how to do a newsletter or how paywalls worked or should work for that kind of thing. So initially, I think I was going to do like the first 10 chapters, and then it would go behind a paywall. And then I was like, oh, that just means no one's going to read it. I tried early access, but no one cared enough for that to work. I tried all these different kinds of options. None of that worked until I just made it free, and then people started reading it. And weirdly, having made everything free, some people started then paying to read it as well, which surprised me greatly. There's other things like I had chapter numbers in the titles of my posts for about a year as well, and then having realized how long the project was going to be, it was just off-putting. Like any new reader coming along and seeing it was like chapter 175, they're like, I'm not going to read that. So I eventually changed all the messaging around Tales from the Triverse to be an anthology and like a collection of short stories that you can hop in at any point, which is true, but I also sort of made it up halfway through. Initially, it was like, this is a serialized novel. And then I realized at some point that it kind of wasn't, but also presenting it as a serialized novel made it really difficult for anyone to want to get on board. Whereas if you presented it, with this particular project anyway, like if I presented it more like a TV show that you could just sort of like jump in season 3 and see what was going on, that did something, and then it seemed to make it easier for people to come on board. So, but it took me ages to figure this out. It all seems kind of obvious in retrospect, but yeah.
Right. So would you utilize sections? Would you create a page? How would you start with an introduction email and say, Project X coming in 2 weeks? Be ready.
Yeah.
What would your lead up be? Would you just start releasing chapters?
So something I do, because it depends what else you write. So I also write a kind of non-fiction thing about writing, but I try to make that as much as possible about my writing. So it's not just me kind of sounding like an annoying like internet guru person telling people what to do. It's more like if I wrote a very action heavy chapter that week, then I'd probably then write about what I found out about writing an action chapter. So it kind of tied into the fiction at the same time. So in terms of build up, I'd probably do it by talking about some of the prep work I was doing and some of the world building or figuring out characters and setting and plot and not worry too much about spoilers at that point, just to kind of reveal the process in the lead up, I suppose. Yeah, I think that's probably what I do next time around. Something else I want to try and do for the next one is from the beginning, build in a kind of model so that at certain intervals, and I'm not sure what they would be, maybe 10 chapters or something, but it then becomes available as a kind of ebook that people can grab, because some people just don't want to read it in chapter by chapter form, no matter how well you do it or no matter how good the platform is. Some people just don't want to do that. It's the same with comics. Some people buy individual issues. Some people wait for like the trade paperback collection. And with Triverse, I didn't really accommodate that at all. You kind of had to read it in the way I did it or not at all. So I think next time around, I'd try and build in those different kind of ways of interacting with it.
What would you do?
Yeah. So
And for you, it's interesting because it's almost like you start over every time, because your serials are more like 12-week chunks. So you could, in theory, test something new and different in the next turnaround, right?
Yeah.
Whereas with Simon, if he tries something different, he probably feels in his mind, I've got to go back and do this change up to the past 3 years that I just did, because then it's going to be weird, right? But for you, you can kind of work on the fly. So you're starting a new serial, which you probably are, because I think you just finished this one.
Not this year. I got a novel to publish, so that's not happening this year. But what Project Next would look like is I would sit down and I would break it into. I use the Blake Snyder beat sheet as just a template. So it's not. Yeah. I'm not like wedded to it, but I use it as a paid template, and I break it into 12 pieces, and I just do a basic map of what my outline is going to look like, and usually the first 3 episodes are more detailed and the rest of it is pretty sketchy. Like it's just, I want to know how I'm ending it. I want to know where the climax is going to be, and I want to know kind of vaguely what it's going to look like. So I start there, and once I have that sorted, I go in and I make a section on my Substack, start a navigation page. And, that's when you start announcing it to people and stuff. But yeah, the writing does not start until I have that outline in my hand and I know exactly where I'm going to end. Even if I don't know exactly what that's going to look like in the actual writing. But yeah, that's how it starts for me.
That's okay. So now we've got Project X. So you guys heard you could start with a section. Some people, if they don't want to use a section, which I don't know why you wouldn't. I feel like it's just for organization's sake. It's less to have to remember and worry about if you create a page, because if you create a page where you're going to list all the chapters, it means you have to remember to go back to the page, edit it, and add new chapters and add the links to those new chapters. So for me, I think a section is just like a no-brainer. And you could always, if you want to have an introduction kind of post before it, you could always just add it to the section, right? And you could pin it to the top of the section, and that way it's always at the top when someone goes to that section. Just a few tips there for people who are kind of trying to figure out, because I know a lot of people don't know what a section is. So it's always like, what is that? Well, it's just a way to kind of pull all of your chapters, episodes, parts, what have you, of the thing that you're writing that are all related and go together into one place when someone clicks on that section, so they will see it all in the order that you released it. And it won't be muddled in with everything else if you use Archive, which will just kind of show everything you've ever posted, and it will be very confusing for people to see.
Also, just in terms of future proofing, like obviously I don't know how such a feature would be implemented if they did do it, but if Substack do ever implement a kind of library type system for readers so they can have like books or collections in that way, like the infrastructure of sections is probably how they'll do it. So if you organize your individual like serials or books or however you want to think of it in sections, you're probably set up quite nicely so that if in a magical future they ever do implement that stuff, you'll be kind of good to go.
Right. I mean, they could easily make it where you go to the homepage and your sections, instead of just looking like a menu, look like the shape of a book. And
Mhm.
you could have a book cover, and it could be like a top row situation. I mean, I'm just envisioning now what I would do. And I could just easily click on it, and it has a nice little graphic where it opens the book and it drops down in the window, and then I'm reading the book. Substack, where are you? Are you listening? Substack, can you hear me? Okay, so yeah, so I wanted to get an understanding essentially of what all of you guys could do. Now, I know that there are some things that people like to do alongside serials because they feel like weekly, like you said, is tough. So I know both of you, I think, do stick with that weekly thing. But if you didn't do weekly, would you consider, like dropping lore about characters or about the world in between, just to give you a buffer, so you would release a chapter every 2 weeks? Or do you think the cadence, and I hesitate to say this, that weekly is the best option if you're going to do a serial, because I don't want to make anyone feel like if they can't do weekly, you should just don't do a serial. But do you find that that's a good rhythm to have? But if you have other things you can sprinkle around it, weekly isn't necessary.
I think a rhythm is good to have. Like I don't think it really matters necessarily how, like, if you spread it out too much, it can be difficult for people because people are busy, and like for them to remember what happened the previous episode. If it
I
was
feel like a month is
3 weeks
stretching it
ago.
too far, because
Yeah,
even if you
yeah.
had a recap at the beginning of it, I mean, depending on how far in, a recap will never do it justice.
Mm,
At that point, finish the serial so you could release it every week.
sure. Yeah. So
Or
like
or
I,
or
I
get
think
yourself enough ahead. Give yourself enough of a buffer. And I say this, but I don't think either one of you do that. If I'm not
no.
mistaken, I think you guys like to write in the moments. You're like, "Oh, I got a chapter due in 6 days. How much have I written?" And Simon is probably like, "Oh, this is due tomorrow. I should probably start this." Right?
Yeah, no,
Like, you guys are
I write
not
as I
writing
go.
ahead at all.
Yeah.
No, not generally. I always start off with that. I always have like a few weeks buffer. In fact, that's something that, like, if someone is interested in writing and publishing as they go, kind of week by week, without much of a buffer, like, I think it is a really satisfying and fun way to write. It's not compatible with everyone's writing style, because you have to obviously write in quite a linear, like, from the start to the end kind of fashion. Otherwise, it won't work for obvious reasons. If you're someone who kind of compiles the story from pieces later on, it doesn't work. But having a buffer right at the start is a good idea, because if you write, say, 6 to 10 chapters before you start publishing, you will find out if you don't like the story, basically. Because what you don't want to do is start and then 6 to 10 chapters in be like, not really getting this. It's not really working for me. So I always try and do that at the beginning, because after that point, I kind of know if I'm going to be in it for the long haul, but without letting any readers down by quitting or
And one
something.
thing I will say is, if you're gonna give yourself a buffer, it is helpful to keep it. Because I think what happens is people give themselves a buffer, and then they fall into the trap of, well, that means I have 10 weeks to write the next chapter, right? So they get to week 9 and they're saying to themselves, oh my God, chapter 11 is coming up in 2 weeks and I haven't started writing it yet. You know what I mean? So I feel like if you're going to give yourself a buffer, because I have fallen into this trap and I know a lot of people have, you need to keep the buffer, which means just because you have 6 chapters ready to go or 10 chapters ready to go, it doesn't mean that you now have 6 weeks to write the next chapter. It
No.
means you have to be continuously writing the next chapter so that the buffer is always that 6 weeks.
You say that, Erica, like it's easy, but
It
unfortunately,
isn't. It isn't.
it's not
But
how my brain works.
I'm saying it
No.
more for myself than I am for you, because I have done this so many times. I did it with my 100 word stories, where I would give myself a 2 week buffer thinking, but then I spent those 2 weeks like, oh man, life is great. I don't have to write anymore. Oh, vacation. And then the 2 weeks were up and I didn't write anything. So now I'm playing catch up and I have to write a 100 word story every day. What the heck was the point of that? Stupid. So if you're going to give yourself a buffer, keep the buffer. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's about figuring out what your preferred process is. Like some people
Right.
will definitely prefer having a buffer because otherwise it will become too stressful a process. Or it could just be that their particular lives, for whatever reason, are slightly too chaotic to be doing it every single week. And having a buffer, even if it kind of flexes a little bit, sometimes it might be a 6-week buffer, then it might go down to 3, and then, but that just gives them that extra bit of wiggle room to fit the writing into whatever the rest of their lives is throwing at them.
And something else I want to bring up, and I only want to bring it up so that we can all agree that this is the right answer to this question because people always ask it. And you know the question. How long should my episode be? How long is too long? And I apologize in the way that I'm saying it, but I hear this so many times. Oh, is 1,000 words good? Is 7,000 too much? Don't say that to Sally because she's released a couple 7,000 word chapters, so she's not a good person to answer that question.
It's true.
But what's the sweet spot that's gonna make everyone who comes to my serial read every chapter word for word and hang on every word and never ever ever say this is too long, I refuse to read it. What's the
Well, here's
magic
the
number? What's the magic? There's a magic number, and don't act like you don't know what the magic number is. Okay? If they don't give you an answer, guys, they're lying to you. 'Cause there's a magic number. Go ahead.
right.
What is it?
Here's the important answer, and I'm going to be very serious about this because I think there are some
Okay.
people who genuinely don't understand how this works. There is no right answer, but also not
Oh,
just that.
what a cop out. What
I
a
know,
cop out.
but the important part is, if your serial chapters, okay, there's two things I think are important. One is the consistency week to week. You want your chapters to be roughly the same amount every week. Doesn't have to be the same, but like roughly the same. Because what you're trying to build is trust with your readers, right? You're trying to build an expectation for what your story is actually, what it looks like. Now, does that mean you might have a shorter chapter here or there or a longer one? Sure, absolutely. But I just think it's really important to build that kind of an expectation in the reader. Second thing is just think about how long it takes to read a particular chapter. 1,500 words to me feels very short when people are waiting a whole week to find out what's happening next. And then you get 1,500 words and you go, oh, that feels really short. But then again, 5,000 words is a lot. And it's true. I have done that and it's a lot. And so you have to understand that you're not going to get instantaneous engagement on a 5,000 word chapter, which I think is where some serial writers start to falter is they go, oh, that was a bad chapter because nobody liked it or nobody read it, or within a day, people haven't been reading it. It's like, no, they're probably saving it for the weekend so that they can read it because 5,000 words is a lot. So I think it is about expectations. It's about pacing. I do think that it doesn't mean your serials have to be constant action and adventure, but there should be an understanding that a serial is structured differently than a novel. You don't have as much time to just kind of go into detail about the landscape or about the this or that. You kind of got to keep things moving. And a 5,000 word chapter can go pretty fast in the reading if the pacing is right. So it is about story structure. And I know it is tricky because a lot of the advice you see on Substack is keep it short. People's attention spans are short, and it's like if they're reading a serial, they are interested in reading what you're writing.
And they know.
Give it to
like
them.
they know. Like if they've
Yeah.
if they've been with Sally from serial 1, then if you started spitting out serial episodes that were 1,000 words, I think people would worry and they say, "Are you okay? Like
What's going on? Is there more that you just haven't posted?
Like this." No, is someone else writing this? Who are you? Who
Yeah,
inhabited
exactly.
your body? 'Cause this is not normal, right? So
Yeah.
what's your answer, Simon, to the
Uh,
how many
yeah,
words? Because I've seen you and I've heard you give this answer. So I'm
Well,
looking
the
up.
only correct answer.
I'm looking at your previous answers, and so you better give the same.
Okay. Well, the only correct answer is what Sally said, which is that the correct word count is whatever is needed by the story. But there are also practical considerations, kind of on the reader end and also on the writer end. So, for example, the way I write, where I'm writing and publishing each week, there is an upper limit on how many words I can write in that time frame. Just practically speaking. So that's a consideration. Like, I can't write a 10,000 word chapter, even if I wanted to, because I don't have enough time to do it in a way that would be decent. I tend to have, so my actual word count that I kind of aim for is about 1,200 words. I always go over that, but that's kind of it's more of a minimum. Like, I used to kind of say it as an average, but it's a minimum word count, I think, because I always think it's just enough to have a bit of substance to the chapter, but it's not too long to start infringing on whatever else the reader is doing, whether they have to get ready for work or do some jobs around the house or want to read another book, like a professional book they bought in a bookshop or something. Like, you don't want to be competing with that. So keeping it slightly shorter does help with some of that, but not at the expense of the story. Like, there's no point trying to hit some magical perfect number if you're going to end up harming the story, whether that's by being too long or too short. Because actually, like what you're saying, Sally, is very true. That just that, I think you nurture your own preferred audience. So, if you publish longer chapters, if every chapter is 3,000 words, that's not a problem. It just means that you will attract readers who like to read chapters that are about that kind of length. You probably won't.
And will expect it.
Yeah.
And then if you can't meet those expectations, then don't write 7,000 word chapters every week.
Yeah, exactly. But you won't get readers who want to read 500 word stories. But that's not a bad thing. It's not a problem. It just means that they have the thing that they like over here, and you have your thing that you write over there. And I think that the thing I've found with writing a newsletter compared to, say, writing on somewhere like Wattpad, like on Wattpad, you do sort of have to obey the algorithm if you want to get anywhere to some degree. Whereas with a newsletter, you sort of attract the people that like the thing that you are writing, which sounds kind of basic, but that is kind of how, over a long period of time, like, this isn't something that happens in a month, but over a long period of time, that is how it goes. So it's quite important to write what you want to write, because otherwise you're going to start developing an audience for something that you maybe don't actually want to be writing, which would be a bad thing.
And I think also something to keep in mind, because there are a lot of genre writers who are writing serialized fiction, they also keep in mind what your genre is typically expects. There might be, romance might lean towards more like a beach read size shorter chapters, whereas, epic fantasy, those readers might be expecting 5,000 to 7,000 word chapters of lore and whatever it is. So, also keep in mind the genre that you're writing and all of that when you're doing your chapters. But there is no magic number. The magic number doesn't exist. There isn't one. The answer is write the chapter until the chapter is finished. And now my next question, because both of you are so different, to end the serial or not to end the serial? Or do you serialize it forever? Or do you go into it with the intention of, this is going to be a novel or a novella, so I'm only going to write a story that's 50,000, 80,000 words, and that is it. So I'm only gonna need the 12 to 16 weeks chunks to do my serial. There are two different camps to this, and I happen to have the two different ones right here. So
I need to end my stories. I just know that I do, partially because it's just the way I like to consume stories. I actually started serializing and the structures of my serial based on two of my favorite TV shows of all time, which are Extras and The British Office, because I love, whether you like Ricky Gervais or not, which I don't love him, but I do like that him and Stephen Merchant hit on what I think is a very good format for TV, which is 2 seasons and a Christmas special, and it's done. And I think he's able to do, they were able to do a lot with that very truncated arc. And I personally enjoy that kind of storytelling. And so that's what I was starting with when I first started out with a serial. That said, like I completely see the appeal of a longer serial, because there have been times, and actually Smoke Mouth is a great example for me, where I got to a certain stage with it and went, this is not as short of a story as I wanted it to be. And there's
Yeah,
so
but
much more I want to do with this.
one of the great things about that, though, is you knew it and you told your audience that that was what they could and should expect. Like, sorry, guys, typically this one would have been the end, but it's not the end. I'm
Yeah.
not done yet. There's more
Yeah.
coming. Stay tuned.
Yeah. And I would have loved to, I would have loved to go back with more of that knowledge with that particular story and expand on it in ways that I can't now because it's been serialized. But that, that just means I can work on it as a novel later. So,
and I think that's gonna go to my next question, but I want Simon to answer that, because I just so happened to pick two people who attacked serialization so differently. So I feel like that is a question that a lot of people are going to be wondering, is if I'm going to serialize, should I be going at it with the intention of doing, even if it's 4 months or 6 months and that's it, or should I be a psychopath like Simon and do over 4 years? Is that the route? Is that the best one to do?
Yeah, I think having endings is really important to the kinds of stories I tell. Like you can do endless stories in a soap opera kind of way, or like you see in comics where it just goes on and on and on forever, and that has a certain appeal in a different way. But I think a lack of an ending can be a problem after a while. So, but I've done it kind of two different ways. So with Triverse, it went very long, and that was partly down to it being that kind of anthology kind of police procedural shows. So in theory, I could have kept it going for as long as I wanted and just done case after case after case. But there's also this background plot, so I knew at some point it was going to come to a close. I just wasn't quite sure when that would be, and it's basically like I was having fun, and then at a certain point I was like, right, I'm going to wrap this up now. But the previous serial I did, which isn't on Substack, but that was after I'd done another very long one, and for that one, the third one, I was like, right, this is going to be deliberately very controlled and short. And I knew it was going to be, I think it was 50 chapters, and I knew precisely what was going to happen in each chapter. And then to make sure I stuck to it, I numbered the chapters, but in reverse. So the first chapter was called 50, and then each chapter's counting down to 0, which kind of plays into the story, but it also meant that I had to hit the precise marks in terms of the story and the outline, because
very clever.
Like chapter 0 had to be chapter 0, if you see what I mean.
Right. There's no -1 after that.
No, exactly. So that was fun. So yeah, it depends again on the story a little bit.
Now, a question I wanted to hop on, because both of you are doing two different kinds of serials. Sally, to your point, you said you wish you had known earlier with your serial so that you could have done something about it. Do you ever consider, just because you serialized it, that when you bring it to publication, because there's two different kinds of publication. There's the Substack publication, but then there's the I'm going to hold the book in my hands, or I'm going to sell an ebook publication. So is it ever a thought in your mind that when you go to the book publication, that the thoughts you're having now about, oh, I probably would have done a little bit more, I would have fleshed this out a little bit more, I would have taken it in a different direction, that instead of it being 12 chapters, it actually worked out more to 20 or 26, that you would do that? Or are you resigned to what I serialized and what my readers have read is the expectation I'm going to give them should they choose to buy it? I'm just going to make little changes here and there, but for the most part, what you read when you read the serialization is what you're going to get if you choose to buy the book.
Yeah, actually, I mean, so funny. My first serial is a book now, not to plug, but IB and Ixos. That one was very much like screen to page. I didn't change very much at all. I just gave it a basic edit because I was happy with the story overall. But no, I mean, for my novel that I'm working on right now for Freelancing Fishmaids, which started out as 2 different serials on Substack. I did a season 1 and a season 2, both were 12 episodes long. I'm starting on the editing process of that now, and it's gonna need quite a bit of finessing to feel less like a serial and more like a novel. And part of that is going to be adding quite a bit of musculature that wasn't there in the serial, because I also had an audience who already knew some of these characters. So I was able to just start kind of in media res with the serials. And I can't do that if I'm going to sell a book more widely to people who've never read Ferris Island before or don't know anything about it. Suddenly I have to kind of give a little bit more context, a little bit more background, just adding things here and there. So yeah, I mean, I absolutely, when it comes to a novel, I think the format is just a completely different thing than a serial. They can go, like with Ivy and Ixos, they can go pretty closely if you've structured it right. But I think there's also room for expansion, which is fun for people if they want to buy the book because maybe they already know the plot, but now they get to see all the extra stuff too.
Right. Now, would you add extra stuff like lore, like that your readers and your fans look for, that you're going to be like, oh, I added a few things where you're going to want to read the extra bits that I added because I played a little bit where I didn't in the...
Oh, sure. There's going to be some... You're fishing for spoilers, Erica, but you're not...
No, I'm not. I'm fishing with Fishmaids. I'm fishing. I see what you did there.
Yes, yeah, there you go. Yeah, no, I mean, but yeah, that is going to be part of the selling point for sure of the novel. Is you've read the serial, but the book is different. It's the same, but it's also different.
Right. So, Simon, you've got 4.5 years. Are you considering? Because I'm sure you're considering publishing it. Now, I don't know if you're going to bring out a Webster's Dictionary sized publication of all 4.5 years, or if you're considering, like you said, it's a series of procedurals where they're solving a case happens, they're solving a case. Are you thinking of doing like a box set where it's like 12 cases that happen over a year's time, and so you could buy them individually as each case, or you could get like a box set with all the cases? I'm helping you on how to publish this. I hope you're writing this down. What's the idea around how you possibly can do a print and or just straight ebook publication of 4.5 years of a serial?
Yeah,
teach us, oh wise one.
Yeah, it's been a tricky one actually, because the previous serials I've done were more novelistic in their structure, and the pacing, the narrative design of the things, so they would adapt more easily into a book form. Whereas Tales from the Triverse was the first serial I did where I properly designed it to be a serial, from sort of top to bottom, and it's much in terms of its pacing and structure and the ensemble cast. It has a lot more in common with television than it does with the novel. So when I've been thinking about the print options, I suppose, and the question was basically either do I fundamentally change it and convert it into something that is a more traditional novel, or do I keep it as is and kind of present it as sort of collected editions of the serial? And I think I'm going to go with that, because to change it into novel form would be such a drastic change that it would be a lot of work, and I can't really be bothered, having already done 4.5 years on this thing. But also it was designed to be a particular thing, so I think to completely change it into something that it wasn't really meant to be would diminish it slightly. But yeah, I think it's going to be like a series of books in some way. But yeah, I'm not sure how long it's going to take me though. So.
And I have 2 more key questions. One of them I wanted to ask because neither one of you, I think, have done this with your serials, and one person I know who has, and if I could add another person to this conversation, it would be Ben Wakeman. Audio, reading your chapters. Now, I know that there are, you talk about wanting to be able to, take a chunk and make it into an ebook, because there are some people who just want to read it as an ebook and not as an email or anything else. What are your thoughts on possibly doing that to people who have, I think, very lovely voices? why are you not reading your chapters? What is wrong with you?
I can't speak for Simon, but for me, it's because I'm tinkering with it right up until I publish it. And so I would have to have it ready ahead of time, long enough to read it, feel happy with the recording, and then
Okay,
post
I
it.
I, I challenge thee by saying, do you not think that you could read the chapter after you've published it and then add the audio later?
I guess that's true. I'm looking for excuses.
Right. I'm here to challenge your reasonings.
Yeah. And see,
And
it's frustrating because I love audiobooks, and so you'd think I'd be as empathetic as anyone to the idea of reading my chapters. And I love the idea of doing it. I think I feel a little bit of I don't know what if imposter syndrome is the wrong word, but a little bit. It's because I don't have like a really good setup for it, and I think if I was going to do it, I would really want to invest in like at least a good microphone, something that would make it worthwhile for people to
and,
actually listen.
and
You
one of
know?
the questions I would ask Ben, and I'm gonna ask you because I think this is also what would happen if you were to read what you wrote and to give audio listeners that enjoyment, is you might be like me where you would edit as you're reading. Because that's one of the best ways to edit is to hear yourself read it out loud. And so my fear and why I don't do it is because if I just published it to my readers and now I'm reading the audio for after the fact, it's going to probably have so many changes in it because
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of it like, oh, wait, I should have reworded that. And so I can't read it the wrong way. I have to read it the right way.
Yeah, you have to put a warning, don't follow along with the
No,
audio.
this is
You'll get
this is
confused.
totally different. So I would love to, ask Ben like how he does it, that he's able to be like, this is how it is. I know that I might need to edit it later, but for the audio listeners, I'm just gonna read it as I wrote it and maybe make a little notation to myself over here that when I go to edit it for later, I will make those changes. But for the audio, I'm just gonna read it as I wrote it.
Mhm.
But Simon, why didn't you over 4.5 years think, I should probably read these chapters? Probably because you didn't want to have to go back through 4.5 years to now read every chapter. Is that why?
Well, I did actually start reading them. So when was it? It was quite a way in. So maybe like the last quarter of the book, I did start doing audio. Um, uh, but so yeah, it's very dissatisfying for anyone who comes along to the book now because like there's a whole first half that is not audio recorded, and then the back half it kind of is. But that was mainly because I didn't think I'd be able to fit it into the schedule, the weekly schedule. But then it got to a
Especially if
point.
you're like Sally and you're editing to the last day and you know.
So I think I started in 2024, maybe doing audio. Like very basic, nothing like what Ben does. But yeah, fairly sort of basic way of going about it. But what I found, which kind of speaks to what you were both saying actually, is that recording the audio ended up becoming the final edit. So I always record the audio just before I kind of finalize the post, I suppose. And no matter how many times I've proofed and edited a chapter, in reading the audio, I always find like a handful of just stupid typos or something. So once I started doing it, it actually became like a vital part of the process. And that helped because it is an extra effort and takes a lot of time. But once I realized it was actually improving the quality of the text version as well, it kind of made sense. So that was all fine. When I first started doing it, I tried using it as a kind of paid perk so that paid subscribers would get the audio version. And it was pointed out to me, I can't remember who by, but someone noted that having the audio version is quite a good accessibility feature, and that locking it behind a paywall was maybe not the most empathetic way of doing it. So at which point I stopped doing that. But yeah, but that was an interesting point because yeah, I think it opens, as well, other than people who just like audiobooks, it does open up the writing to like all sorts of people who otherwise might not have the time or not be able to read for whatever reason. So yeah, it's definitely worth doing if you can. And you can make audio sound pretty good without having to spend tons of money, which is nice. It's a lot harder with video, but audio you can push it quite far without breaking the bank.
Just because I know we could be talking about serials forever, but I do want to try to wrap this up. And one of the last things I wanted to talk about, which Sally, you kind of mentioned, and so did you, Simon, is editing. So you're writing your serial, you're doing your chapters, maybe you decide to do audio and you catch edits. Pre and post editing. Do you edit post email or do you say, whoop, well, that mistake went in. I forgot to capitalize a name or I forgot a comma or whatever because I feel like even in the most professional of the top 5 publishing books that I've read, I will find a typo. So let's start by saying you will never find them all. Something's going to slip past even the best of most professional editors. Okay. Let's
Yes.
start there. But I know
And
that
I'm
there are some
definitely
people who
not
say,
that.
how many times should I edit the thing before I post it? After I post it, should I edit it or should I just leave it alone and go on to the next chapter? Like what's my cadence here? What's my rule of thumb when it comes to editing pre and post publishing it and sending it out to my millions of subscribers?
I think it's quite hard to say because everyone has a different style of writing. Like in terms of like how much editing to do before publishing, it's really tricky because some people write very messy first drafts, which is like perfectly fine. It's the way they do it, and it will then become something amazing. Other people write much more solid first drafts that, just in terms of typos, sentence structure is maybe a bit more solid to start with. So everyone's kind of starting at completely different points, which so it makes it hard to sort of say. For me, I read through a few times. I do the audio recording, which is like another pass. It's never enough. It would be amazing to like be able to work with an editor, but because of the way I do it, in terms of the sort of speed and the amount, like I couldn't afford it basically. In terms of once it's published, I will always go back and fix typos or just genuine like weird sentences if someone points it out if I spot it. But I have a very strict policy of not changing any plot details or character moments or anything like that, because that just seems quite unfair on readers.
Now, knowing that you use Scrivener, after you fix it in Substack, I'm assuming then you have Scrivener open next to it, and any change you made there, you make in Scrivener so that they match. Okay, because I do the same, but I also put a little note, typically at the top, that says this is a vomit draft. There will be mistakes. There will be errors that I didn't catch. I try to catch it, but if you see it, I don't mind if you tell me in the comments because that's something else that I want to ask, especially Essie Reed being an editor. I can only imagine. Let me put the spotlight on you. Not that there isn't a spotlight on you right now.
I know I'm like struggling with the lighting in my office right now. Oh, I wanted to close my blinds, but it might make me in the dark. That's slightly better, actually.
That's actually better.
That's better.
That's better.
Yeah,
so what is your editing process, policy, what have you?
What's funny is that when it comes to my own work, a lack of perfectionism has been my saving grace. I go through, I do a final read through, I do a couple of final read throughs, but once it's out, I don't necessarily touch it. The only time I change anything is if I've gotten something wrong. Like if there's a piece of information that like there was one time when I don't even remember what it was now, but it was a short story I wrote where I got like a real life name incorrect. I was like, the first comment was someone being like, did you mean? And I was like, yes, I didn't mean that. So I had to go back and change it. But I think partially it's because so many of my readers are on email. It doesn't matter. They're not going to see it. Like if I change it, they're not going to see it. So it doesn't matter. If it's something that's that important, I will do a pinned comment at the bottom just to see like if anyone will catch it, but for me, I know that I'm going to edit again. If I like a story well enough, I'm going to re-edit it and publish it in a different format anyway. So I feel like typos these days are like drop stitches or, twisted stitches in knitting. Like it shows you're human. A machine didn't write this. I did.
Mhm.
And there's typos in it. So,
Right.
the occasional wrong word or misplaced punctuation, I think is like, it's just part of the jam of being an online writer, you know? So, and perfectionism can keep you from publishing. I think that's
Right.
for me a big one too.
Yeah.
And
One thing
always
I'd add as
remember.
well.
Yeah.
Sorry, Eric. I was going to say one thing that I found really interesting and this is kind of unique to serial writing in a way, is that if you have that policy of, once it's published, it's canon, basically, like you can't change the story once it's out there, it forces you to make certain creative decisions which you might otherwise not make. So, for example, if you've included something in chapter 2, and then when you get to chapter 20, you realize that it's whatever that thing is really awkward and you wish you'd done something else. If you were writing the whole manuscript ahead of time, or you were just writing a novel in a normal way, you'd probably go back and edit chapter 2 to whatever you want it to be and then carry on and off you go. With a serial, if you have committed and you've published those chapters and you're saying, I'm not going to go back and retrospectively change stuff, then you have to find a creative way to get around whatever that issue is, which quite often will then lead you into some really interesting places that you just wouldn't have gone to if you were writing it in a different way, if you were publishing in a different way. That's something I find kind of endlessly fascinating. Like, and where writing a serial it's less of a like you're not giving anything up in that regard. You're actually gaining a really interesting bit of process that's kind of unique to that format.
It's like a puzzle. It adds a different piece of the puzzle that you have to figure out how to rearrange. Yeah, that is fun. It's scary initially when you go, uh-oh, I may have written myself into a bit of a corner here. And then you have to think, well, there's no way out of it except through it. So I got to figure it out, That's fun.
All my readers have read this, so now I can't just do something different and say that really didn't happen in chapter 4.
Nope.
I
Can't
was
pretend.
kidding.
Can't pretend. Can't tell them, no, you didn't see that.
No. And
That's
that
not
is
what you
true.
said.
That is something I want to remind people that, you have to remember that your audience isn't just using Substack. They aren't just reading your email. So give yourself a bit of grace if you feel, terrified, because that's happened to me so many times. And my wife will be the first one to say it to me. You sent that email and there was a typo in it. Like, listen. I will fix it in the Substack post, but the email is the email and I can't do anything about it. Like, it's done. I can't undo it.
Yeah.
I can't fix that typo. I don't know. So don't beat yourself up about it. If you want to fix it, you can. You don't have to. And also remember, if you do intend on publishing your book, publishing your serial, then yeah, like Sally said, you're going to edit it later. You don't have to stress about it right now. Right now, pat yourself on the back that you wrote the next chapter, that you published the next chapter, that there are people out there who are going to be reading that chapter and possibly engaging with it in any way, shape, or form. And that, Substack is giving us these tools and these features that are allowing that kind of engagement and that kind of freeing ability to just write and publish and let the chips fall where they may kind of situation that we didn't have before. And I'm so thankful for it, because if I had just stayed on Patreon and WordPress and Mailchimp, I would never have met either of you. Truthfully,
Yeah.
which is mind-boggling that would never have happened. This discussion would never have happened. This resurgence, it feels like, of serialized fiction via, email, would not, I think, be happening in such a way that it's happening. So it's pretty cool. Don't hate Substack. Don't hate the player, hate the game. I don't know. But it's not their fault. They're doing what they can, but we can also utilize the tools that we have to kind of try to make our Substacks and our serials work as best as possible. And that there are people willing to read it despite not having great navigation, despite, not knowing that there are sections on Substack and there's a button you could click and easily see all the chapters, lined up, right? Like, people are still managing to find a way to read our work and to engage with our work, and that's pretty cool. And I want to thank both of you for joining and taking the time to talk about your thoughts on serialized fiction. And I think I tried to insert as many of the questions as I saw in chat as I could in our discussion. So hopefully people got answers that they were looking for. There was a lot of discussions happening, but I tried to parse out the questions. And maybe we can, in 5 years' time, when Substack has completely changed the game again, we can return here and pine on these years. Remember when it was just Substack notes and life was so freeing? Look at us
Sally
now.
would have written another 25 serials, and I've just
Exactly.
the second one.
And you're just closing out your second one. 5 years serial. He's going to extend it just a little bit. I do want to ask that question though before both of you go, because both of you have just finished, in a way, a serial. Sally, you just said 2027 and don't ask me before. You basically said don't look at me till 2027. It ain't.
I need a break.
Simon, I know you are doing this whole writing short stories thing for a little bit, but are you secretively looking at your next 10-year serial? Working on your next epic, never-ending
definitely be something.
serial?
Yeah, there'll be something
Because
at some
I feel
point,
like you're someone, if that's what you do, like you got to scratch the itch, right? Like, sure, take a break. Okay, that's fine. You want to release short stories, do your thing. But I feel like you're the type of person who's saying to yourself, I need another thing that's going to keep me going every week. That's going to keep my wheels churning, and a serial of a massive length seems to be what does it for you. So
yeah, I mean, I initially started writing serials just as an experiment because I wonder what this is like. And then it turned out that I absolutely love doing it. Like, it's my preferred way to write. So even if there's other things going on, that other opportunities that I could be like, writing serials is specifically the thing I enjoy doing the most. Like writing this short story at the moment, I think it's going okay, but not really enjoying it. It's really weird. Like, I've just been writing stuff and no one's reading it, and it's just sort of feels strange. So yeah, no, I'll definitely be doing another serial at some point. But
okay.
I'm quite tempted to take one of my previous Wattpad serials, which are kind of like languishing in Wattpad prison at the moment. I might take one of them and then re-serialize that, but with significant edits along the way. There's a new version of that. That'd be quite good. In my head, that would be slightly easier because it already exists in some form. Whether that would turn out to be the case or not, I'm not sure. So yeah,
okay.
Might be doing that.
Sounds. I'm looking forward to whatever comes out. And Sally, I'm looking forward to your book that you're working on, that will hopefully come out this year. Is that what we're looking?
Yes, the hope is later this year. Yeah.
Okay.
So
looking for that. We can have a live discussion when that happens.
Yeah,
I would love to have you on again. And the same for you, Simon, because I know this is my first time getting to talk with you, so I'm so happy. I don't know why it took us this long to get to this point, but we're here.
Very strange.
And I think this is the first time, Simon and Sally, that you've been on live together as well. So I just thank you so much for taking the time. Simon, I know it's very late for you, so go to bed. And thank you. So bye guys. And the live for this will be shared tomorrow, because I did just share an email earlier today, and I try not to do 2 emails in a day. So this will be sent through Top End Fiction in an email tomorrow. So thank you guys.
Thanks for organizing, Erica.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye everyone.